Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar titled What is Your Productivity Cocktail? This webinar is presented by New Horizons Training Partner Manager Mechanics' very own Eric Bloom. A little bit about New Horizons. We're a proven worldwide training provider with flexible learning solutions covering a broad spectrum of topics taught by industry-leading instructors. You can see there are just a few bullet points about us. But you aren't here to hear about New Horizons. You already probably know who we are. You're here to listen to Eric speak. So with all ado, Eric, it is all you.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for engineering today's call, and to New Horizons in general for sponsoring today's webinar. If I could begin by saying also is that we usually have a little bit of a following going on, people who watch us, say, month to month. But this is a free monthly webinar that I do in cooperation with New Horizons. So if you're back, welcome. Welcome again. If this is your first time on one of our webinars, is that you'll see at the end, we'll have the date when it is. It's usually the second Tuesday of the month. Anyway, my name is Eric Bloom. This is just sort of the one slide about me, and then we'll plow into our material. As you can see here, I'm a CIO by background, have various books. In fact, as today's topic is based on the third book listed there, which I'm proud to say came out 2 weeks ago. So it's finally available on Amazon. Yay. And we're going to be doing a class related to with New Horizons. I also write for CIO.com. For 4 years, I wrote for ITworld.com, as you see there. I'm also in addition to having Manager Mechanics, the training company, I'm also a keynote speaker. And feel free to follow me on Twitter, as shown here. But enough about me. Let's now make the rest of today about you. What you're going to be seeing, and these are excerpts of the book, this shown here, Productivity Driven Success, and we're going to be having a class with available through New Horizons under the same name coming up soon. But with that, I'd like to begin after saying all this stuff, new productivity book and all this, is at the end of the day, nobody cares about productivity. I'm going to let that one settle in for a minute. I just want to say that one again because I love this line. Nobody cares about productivity. What they care about is the time, money, and resources it generates, the business models it creates, the competitive advantage that it provides from your firm to other companies, the corporate growth that it generates through having the time, money, and resources to do other things, and so on. Now, also, I should have said, as we move through today's webinar, let me say that welcome to Drinking Through a Fire Hose. For those of you who've been on my webinars before here, you know that I tend to move fast. Well, we're going to be moving just even a little bit faster in this one because, actually, I'm just going to bring us back to the first slide for a moment. You may have noticed the subtitle, the 8 productivity amplifiers shown here. So as a result, what we're going to do is we're going to go through what each of these 8 are, not only to give you an understanding of why it's important in enhancing your productivity, but a different tip or trick related to each one of them. So first of all, let's talk about what productivity amplifiers are. Now, definitionally, what they are is their business activities. When we get to the list a few slides down, you'll say, oh yeah, we do a fair amount of this stuff. But they're basically using these activities or modifying these activities in a way that can increase the process efficiency. In other words, you're doing it now, what's a better way to do that? In fact, that ties very closely to BMP, if anyone does any of that, or quality circles, or any of the productivity type stuff. Next, it enhances the probability of project success. Namely, is as if you're more productive, if you can do things in less time, do things with less money, do things with less resources, etc. What it does is that minimally could make your project more efficient and higher return on investment because it takes less, but also it lets you use that time toward other things. And lastly, which should be the case with every business or project endeavor that goes on within your company, is it'll help you meet your organizational goals. Now, this is a really lofty way of saying that as said in the earlier slide, it gives you time, money, and resources to really do great things, because the more time that you can move away from performing particular standard tasks, the more time it will give you to do more meaningful work. Now, before I talk about these 8 productivity amplifiers, there's a couple of things that I want to say and give you a quick story on this one. First of all, is that quantifying dollars that are based on employee salaries, saving time. In other words, I've come up with a productivity goal, that a productivity enhancement that saves each of our 1,000 employees of the company half an hour a month. So then how do you go back and you assess, well, how much money are you saving the company? What you could say is that, for example, that the average fully loaded weight of an employee from a cost perspective is $100 an hour. So therefore, if you're estimating that your project will save each of these 1,000 employees half an hour a month, so what that would be is that would be 500 hours a month. Take that 500 hours a month times $100 per hour. That being the new math, that's what, $5,000 a month? Yes, $5,000 a month. All right, which then what you could do is you could extrapolate that over the year. Now, this is really dangerous, because what happens is that you're setting expectations for your productivity project, which is unrealistic. That's why we call it the productivity fallacy. I'll give you an example of this. Many, many years ago, I worked for a company, and what they did, to their credit, was they started a major productivity enhancement project. And what they did was every department within the company, whether that be IT, accounting, accounting, human resources, manufacturing, software development, whatever it was, is they basically made a contest. Is that how much money could you save through certain types of productivity enhancement? And they made it a contest. And if we won the contest, everyone got a certain number of points toward a catalog where you could buy, a new toaster oven, new golf clubs, things along that line. Well, what they did was some great innovation came out of that. Some great productivity enhancement. But what happened was, because people did this productivity fallacy thing, is at the end of the day, is that when they added up the amount of funny money, which I'll refer to it here, namely the amount of time, the amount of money saved based on estimates of saved salary time, the amount of money that this project saved was more than the gross income of the company overall. Now, that was really too bad for 2 reasons. One of which is it basically, negated all of the value, the value of the program, because when you say, hey, good news, we're a $100 million company, and the salaries, the productivity enhancements that we just did have saved $400 million. Well, that's physically impossible, because the company isn't spending that much money to begin with. So anyway, what happened was, which was the real sad part of the story, is it lost total credibility for the productivity enhancement programs, and the whole program was canceled. So what I would say to you is, be realistic. If you have if you put in a type of productivity enhancement that actually saves time, what you're doing is, unless it's hourly employees that won't be working during those hours, or contractors that you no longer need or you need for less time, then what happens is you're not saving money, you're saving time. So I just caution you with this, because I've seen too many great productivity enhancement projects go awry, specifically because of this productivity fallacy. Now, next issue. Just this is the last issue, and then we actually get into some good stuff. But I like giving you this caution up front, because many people implementing productivity type improvements up front will make these mistakes, and I don't want it to happen to you. Now, what this one is basically a picture's worth 1,000 words, but I'm going to go to the next slide on this one. But what this says, that when you delegate, which is a good thing. In fact, delegation is one of the productivity amplifiers. What does that delegation mean? Well, whoever you're delegating it to, you're going to have to tell them what they're doing. You might have to meet with them. You might have to email them. You're going to have to get status report potentially on what is the status of that task. So then what happens is the productivity side effect is that by increasing your delegation, which presumably is a productivity enhancement, what are you doing? You're increasing the number of meetings and increasing the number of emails, which takes away from productivity. Looking at the bottom two here where it says meetings and emails. Well, guess what? If you say, you know what, we're going to have less meetings, more time to do things. So now all of a sudden, everyone in your group has 5 hours less of meetings a week. Wouldn't that be cool? It's like half a day off. But if there's 5 hours worth that you gain back by meetings is replaced by 10 hours of emails to coordinate what would have been done in those meetings, then from an overall holistic perspective, in fact, you're losing time rather than saving it. So understand, that the interaction between these, you see the same thing in computers all the time, these contradicting goals. An example of it, classically is that sort of with cloud computing, this moves away from it. But in the data center, you get the data center people who are being tasked and measured based on server consolidation. And then you have the programmers like me. I went up the software development side of the house. Is that when I was asked how many servers do I need to develop this new major application, is my answer would be, cool, how many you have? So as a result of that, as that is a standard, goal issue between two parts of IT, you get the same thing here. Decreasing emails may cause what? More meetings, and vice versa. Couple more things now. So now I'm moving away from the bad things into the good things. And by the way, I should also say, is anyone who has any questions on this? Please put them in the question box. Brian will be watching that through our hour together, and at appropriate time will interrupt me with the question directly, or in fact we'll wait to the end when we can do Q&A. We officially end at noontime. If anyone has any detailed questions they'd like to ask, my time is yours. I'll stay on longer, and we can just discuss it should you wish. But anyway, from here, now let's get into what the improvements must be. Regardless of the productivity improvement that you implement, it must have these 4 characteristics. It must be aligned with your organizational goals and objectives. As said earlier, quite frankly, they all should be tied to your objectives. Because if not, if the company is moving in one direction and you're enhancing things in another direction, at best, it will be ignored. At worst, people will be wondering why you're spending resources in unneeded areas. The next is systematic. Very often, productivity-related projects are done sort of as a skunk works on the side, as opposed to being prioritized and such directly through your core processes. In other words, whatever process that you use to prioritize and fund projects, your productivity type projects should go through the same business rigor. Next, it must be measurable. By measurable, what I mean is that you have to be able to show the key savings that were made. So if you say, oh, all right, hey, we've reduced meetings. Okay, that's great. By how much? I don't know, is that a whole bunch. People have less meetings. That's far less powerful than by saying that we have reduced them by this certain amount, or that we've done this with email, or we've reused these types of assets, or we've enhanced our knowledge transfer. It's nice to say it, but if you can't count it, then it doesn't count. And lastly, profitability is in every project that you take on, quite frankly, whether it's related to productivity or not, the time, money, and resources that are expended to drive that project should have business value greater than its cost. All right, now what you've all been waiting for, dun 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 dun. Whoops, oh, one more, I'm sorry, is also your projects have to be holistic in nature. What that means is you have to look at them from a bigger view. Is that, as we go through these, I'll just bring it to the next slide so you can see it, I promised. There we go. All right, I'll move back for a second. Is as you implement these different issues, you need to look at things from a global perspective. What I mean by that within your company is that what are the side effects, as talked about in the previous statement? What are the real gains that are potential? When you look at things more realistically, what's the proper mix of productivity enablers based on your company's size, its issues, the age and movement of the workforce, things along that line within your company. So think of things from the bigger picture, not just, gee, let's enhance this or try to improve that. All right, here they are. The 8 productivity amplifiers, and then we're going to view them in a different format which categorizes them. But there's constructive delegation. What that is that's basically delegating, but as you'll see, there are different tips and tricks that if you delegate in certain ways, using certain philosophies, it can dramatically enhance not only the throughput of your department, but what it can also do is that it can increase the productivity and cut the costs of those activities. Ongoing process improvement. That's the pretty obvious one. That's Kaizen, that's BMP, that's all of these other things that are used to basically make things quicker, shorter, etc. The next is communication. From there we talk about knowledge transfer, time management, and the others shown here. Now, as we go to discuss these one at a time, first I want to do is I want to categorize them into these 3 categorizations. Is that what you'll see is that all of these productivity amplifiers are broken into one of 3 types. What they are is that they're interactive. Delegation, meetings, communication between individuals and organizations. Think of the amount of time that you spend in meetings, doing emails, sending out communications to others, one-on-one conversations, things along that line. And what the danger is if these are not done effectively. From there, we'll talk about time management, the standard cast of characters. And then we're going to talk about leveraging the zone. In fact, what this one was based on is that I had was given the honor and opportunity to do a TED Talk about a month ago related to actually this specific topic, leveraging the zone, which is basically not only how you can enhance your own productivity, but those of people in your team if you work with them on this concept. And then lastly, organizational productivity. How can you increase processes? Asset reuse, I think you'll find fascinating. What that is, and knowing it's basically an IT-related audience, what I'm going to say here is what software have you built? What processes have you implemented? What methodologies have you brought in? What software that have you purchased that you can use in other ways within the company at virtually no additional cost? And then this last one is huge within IT as well as other parts of the company. And what that is that's knowledge transfer. What knowledge transfer is, for example, is if you have retired people in baby boomer age, my age, so to speak, who are beginning to retire from your companies, how do you maintain that corporate knowledge? If you have lots of contractors come in, build things, and leave, how do you get those who are employees staying in the company understanding what was done so that you're not reinventing the wheel or trying to figure this stuff out? So these are the 8 items that we're going to be talking about for the next 40 minutes or so. By the way, remember, if you have any questions if we go through this, love to hear them. Let's start by talking about constructive delegation. Okay, here's the concept. One delegation action should provide 2 or more benefits. What I mean by that is this, is that when you delegate to someone, what's the obvious benefit of that? Well, one could be that you don't have to do it now. But I'm going to pick on Brian here, who, again, is the one engineering the call. Let's say that Brian works for me. And I say, hey, Brian, will you perform this task? All right, Brian does the task. That's the number one shown here. Basically what it is poof, the basic benefit of delegation is the task is being created. Now, me as the manager or the project manager could say, well, another big benefit of it is I hate doing that, and I didn't dump it on Brian, but I delegated it to Brian. So that's the obvious one. But what I would say to you, remember we're talking about productivity here. What is the second benefit that I can get by delegating this specific task to Brian? Will it in fact provide employee growth? Will it give him training, increase his skills, things along that line? Is there some intrinsic benefit to him in regard to enhancing his career? Is it employee motivation? What I mean by that is that will Brian say, oh, great, I really wanted to work on this project or learn this new skill. Thanks so much for giving this to me. Could it maybe be a minor reward? Hey, Brian, you know what? Great job on that last project. I'm going to give you an easier one. I'm going to delegate this one, which will be a little more of a slam dunk for you. Well done on the other. Get it done, but get a little bit of a rest. Could it be improved quality? Maybe it's a task that I'm doing that Brian is, in fact, more qualified to do than I am. So even though that I'm the manager, as I give the task to Brian, or maybe it's just he'll have more time to work on it than I did, it can enhance its quality. Employee retention could be of any one of these reasons above. Think about it. If I'm motivating Brian, if I'm growing him professionally, if I'm providing him training, if I'm giving him rewards for things that are well done, if he has the ability to improve his own quality or the quality of the works being done, that's going to help retain, his retention at the company. Namely, he'll work with us longer and won't leave. What it can also be used, maybe a second benefit, is employee evaluation for future roles. I'll give you an example of this one. Let's say that Amy also works for me. Amy is new to the team. Brian's been with me for a little while. And I'm thinking that Brian might make a great supervisor at a future time. So what am I going to do? I'm going to say, hey, Brian, why don't you mentor Amy on, how to, show her how to do these applications, show her how to run the nightly production cycle, etc. Just sort of mentor her and teach her how it's done. So for Brian now, what's happened? First, certainly for Amy, by me delegating this to Brian, Amy is going to get a lot of additional training and learning, etc. But at the same time, Brian is beginning to gain leadership skills by mentoring Amy and teaching her and so on. And then what I can do, this is a threefer, because I get something from this too. What I get from this is I get to observe how well Brian is mentoring Amy, which helps me assess his skills as a future tech lead or manager. So this is the concept behind delegation, is that what I want you to do is always look for multiple benefits from the same delegation action. With this, I'm going to give you one of the additional concepts that's in the book, is every job has three parts. As you see here, it's the must-dos, the hired-to-dos, and the wanna-dos. And if I was a wise guy, I'd say, too bad there's no Xanadu. But anyway, I won't go there. I guess I already did. But what this is the must-dos. These are the things that you have to do when you get in trouble. As a manager or cost center manager, for example, what do you have to do? You have to do performance reviews, timesheets. You have to review, and this one I'll continue talking on, review the actual versus budgeted, your actual versus budget on your spending. So let's say that every month, and for those of you who are cost center managers, have you ever woken up on, say, the first Tuesday of the month and gone, yes, it's time to review my budget, I can't wait. Woo. No, but what happens is Brian, who wants to be a cost center manager at some point, might love doing the budget. So let's hold that thought for a moment. So anyway, the must-dos are the things you have to do when you get in trouble. If you don't fill out your expense report, do your time cards. If you're a manager, do people's performance reviews. It's just a task that's performed. You get in trouble if you don't, but you don't get benefit if you do. The hired to-dos, if I said to you, hey, what's your job? What were you hired to do? You'd say, well, I'm a business analyst, and I do business requirements, or I'm a project manager, or I'm a programmer working in Java, or I do testing. It's whatever it is. And then your want to-dos are the skills and the responsibilities that you want to gain experience with and learn so that you can grow your career and get promoted. So again, it's it's sort of the busy work that we all have to do. And this is true, by the way, from the newest intern to the president of the company. They all have things that follow into these three categories. So now let's tie this back to delegation. Again, Brian works for me. Now, I'm a cost center manager. I hate doing the budget versus actual analysis in my budget every month. Brian is really excited about that because that will help give him skills to be a future manager. Now, using this budget example, I have to assume that salaries and confidential things aren't in there if we have any people cringing saying, oh my God, letting someone on your team do the budget. That stuff aside. But then what happens is I go to Brian. I say, hey, Brian, what I'd like to delegate to you, certainly I'll still be responsible for it as the cost center manager, but what I'd like to delegate to you is reviewing the budget versus actual report on a monthly basis. It'll help you learn how budgeting is done at the company and hopefully future preparation for you being a cost center manager. So what have I done? What are all the wins from that? First, I've gotten rid of one of my must-dos, which gives me more time to do my hired to-dos and wanna-dos. Brian, I've given him a wanna-do, namely the budget piece. So what happens is I've motivated him, I've provided training, I've got something off my plate that I don't want to do to give me more time to do other things. Think of all of those benefits that are coming because I've strategically decided to delegate the budget versus actual analysis to Brian. Everything you delegate, for what it is, who it goes to, should all be based on this one-to-many relationship concept. Next, innovative meeting management. You ever laid a meeting that looked like this? I'm just going to leave it here because I love this picture. But anyway, is that the next topic that we're moving to, and told you we were going to be moving fast. Now, by the way, all I'm giving you from the book is this is just, different concepts. I wanted to give you at least one to first describe the content and then give you a little bit of tips and advice on each one of the categories. But anyway, let's talk about innovative meeting management. What does a meeting cost? I alluded to earlier when I was given the productivity example of, let's say, the average hourly cost per person is $100. I don't mean that everyone at the company is making 250 grand. What you do is you multiply, actually it'd be 200 grand. What you do is you take the number of hours, an hourly wage, you multiply it by 2,000. That gives you approximately 50 weeks of work. So that's just where that comes from. Just an extra tip for you. So let's say that this $100 an hour is your workspace, your computer, your salary, your benefits, all that stuff that you end up spending on an individual employee on average. So you have a meeting, it's an hour long, you have 5 participants in it. It's the new math, but best I remember is 100 times 5 is 500. So what happens is that meeting, your staff meeting with 5 people in it, including yourself, costs the company $500. It's conceptually. You're on salary. If you don't have the meeting, it's not like the company's going to increase its profitability. But it's a good way to consider meetings because what I would say to you as you're scheduling who is in these meetings and should the meeting take place, is think of it from a cost perspective. Because at the end of the day, people only work a finite number of hours, and they're being paid for that finite resource, namely their 40 hours or whatever it is a week. So think of this when you're deciding who to invite and should the meeting happen at all. Next is agendas. Is that the big thing that I want to show you on agendas is really twofold. One of which is notice that it says the time of each item during the meeting. We're going to do topic 1 from 2 o'clock to 2:10. Well, why do you want to put the timing on a 1-hour meeting? Why? Because I saw these great things about Brian. Brian, may I throw you under the bus for a moment? It'll be in good
You sure can.
Thanks, sir. It'll be for good reason. But anyway, let's say that on this first topic is that I have Brian on the call. Now I'm done with you, Brian. I just wanted permission to beat on you. I hear that you still have your microphone on. But anyway, is that topic 1 goes from 2 to 2:10. This is an important topic for Brian. He's personally involved with it. And what happens is he starts pontificating about the importance of topic number 1. from 2 o'clock to 2:05 to 2:10 to 2:15, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, how am I going to quiet Brian up? Well, because the agenda here says that the task ends at 2:10, then I can very politely say to Brian, I can say, hey, Brian, you have some great thoughts on this topic, but you know what? We're running behind schedule. We only have 10 minutes budgeted for that topic. Why don't you and I talk about this offline? So what it does is it gives me permission to basically end the discussion on a particular topic if I feel that it's not to the benefit of all in the meeting. So then what it does is, so these timings are great for those number of reasons. Second of all, and this time I'll talk really good about Brian, is let's say that Brian is my manager, or and as a result of that, he knows that during my meeting is that we're going to be making a decision on topic number 3. And I'll talk about these things on the far right in a moment. On topic number 3. So that what happens is he can look at his watch and say, oh, all right, topics number 1 and 2, I know about those. So he can say, if he knows that my meetings are on schedule, that Brian can pop into my meeting about 25 past 2 and say, yep, wanted to come in, couldn't make the whole meeting, but wanted to be here as part of the discussion on the decision on topic number 3. So it lets people see what's going on, which brings me to this stuff on the right-hand side. What these are, and this is probably the piece you haven't seen before, is by putting what you're going to be doing for each of these 4 topics, and these are 4 standard things. You can put whatever you want on the right. But if it says for your information from 2 to 2:10, are people going to prepare for that? No, they're just going to say, oh, all right, cool, he's going to tell us how the project's going, whatever it is. If I'm seeking their input from the 2:10 to 2:25, they're going to say, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, all right, gee, Eric's going to ask me in the meeting, you know, what I think about this topic. It'll give them a little time ahead of time to think about it. A decision being made, they may say, oh God, I hate Eric's meetings, but if we're making a decision on this, I really should be there for that. Or lastly, is it a project update? Lastly, Brian, I'm going to call him again my boss, is that if he now looks at this and says, you know what, I come to some of these meetings and there's nothing on here that's relevant to me today, he can just drop me an email and says, hey, Eric, you know what, I'm going to skip the meeting because there's nothing particularly that you need me for here. So it has multiple meetings regarding who shows up, keeping people on time, etc. I'm going to give you one more tip on meetings. Do you ever try to strategically define the order of the meetings, the order of the items, the topics rather, in your meeting? You know who does this? Anybody watch Jimmy Fallon or any of those guys? They come up with when they do the monologue, they come up with what the best jokes are, or all their jokes. You know, the 10 they're going to say that night. They put the second best joke first, the third best joke in the middle, and the best joke at the end. And then they sort of work it like that. Why? Because they want the last one at the end, they want you to remember. You need a pretty good one at the front, but, you know, to keep you engaged. But if it's the best one, then it's all downhill through the rest of the monologue. So what I would say to you is use the same type of strategy and mindfulness, not about where to put your jokes, but in what is the order. Like, for example, if you have something that someone's pushing you to have on the agenda, make it last. Put it at the last item. And then what happens is, oh, just silly me, I ran a little late in the schedule and we couldn't get to it. I apologize. Or the middle one. If you have a major issue that everybody's waiting for, you know, is that anything you talk about before that, nobody's really paying attention. They won't be engaged. So if you have, as they say, the white elephant in the room, talk about it first, clear the air, and then move forward. How about if you have a controversial topic related that you're going to be discussing, that you're not sure how people are going to feel about it? Put 3 or 4 non-controversial topics before it with the specific idea that, you know, you'll get them saying yes to the first thing, yes to the second thing, yes to the third thing. All of a sudden, saying yes to the 4th thing becomes a little bit easier. That's, in fact, a negotiation trick also. So anyway, is that these are ways of making your meetings more efficient. From here, now, let's talk about leveraging the zone. What is the zone? Let's talk about that first. And as I'm moving forward here, I told you today's webinar was going to be drinking through a fire hose, so I hope you have your safety belts on. But anyway, What is being on the zone? We've all heard of it. When we're mentally clear and highly focused and physically able and motivated to do the task. This could be writing a new advanced algorithm for machine learning, or it could be for cleaning your garage. All right, but it's the task you want to do. You're really pushing to do it. You're ready, and so on. The problem is, at least for me, is I can't always be in the zone. I can't always be at the top of my game. Look at this list. 100% of your week. Can you be highly focused, mentally clear, physically able, and motivated? I'm pretty good, but I don't know. I'm not that good. All right? So what do I do when I'm not in the zone? Now, what this is, this next slide here, this actually was the basis for the TEDx talk that I did about 3 weeks ago. It should be actually up on the TED site within about a week or so. It takes about a month to get them up there. But what I propose is that people have 4 zones. Top of your game. That's when you're all this stuff. All right? You're just there and ready to roll. The next one is you're alert, but not particularly creative. There's others when you're sluggish. You're making it through the day, but you're sort of doing the going through the motions. And then the last one is more just, simply keeping awake. Each of these things basically is when you have a different level of energy. So for me, what I do when I'm at the top of my game, I write books, write columns. I'll do proposals for clients. I write webinar presentations, things along that line. Now, if I'm alert but not creative, I basically will go into things that aren't creative in nature, but it's really important that I'm paying attention. What that could be is answering important emails. It could be doing invoicing. It could be working on maybe a sort of a standard proposal that I'm doing for a client, things along that line. When I'm sluggish, what I'll do is things like busy work. I'll go through my spam folder. It seems everything's going into spam and clutter folders these days. Very important emails. So I got to go through that. I got to look at, got to file papers and put them in different locations. I'll do my expense report, things along that line. A status report. That it's sort of unless really creativity is needed, you're just sort of ticking and tying and doing things the way they are. Now, keeping awake. For me, and trust me on this one, it's the voice of experience, is that for me, keeping awake basically if I'm in that mode, like I'm half asleep, I don't touch my computer. It's too easy for me to accidentally delete something. I'll clean my office. What I'll do is I'll put things away. I'll file some things and put them there. Or maybe what I'll do is I'll just back off. Maybe try to read something of interest. I just got actually a new book on someone sent to me based on a class we teach called Difficult Conversations. I'm hoping they didn't send it to me because they're about to have a difficult conversation with me. I think it's based on the class that we're teaching for them. But anyway, so the trick for you here, the big takeaway is as you look at a task on your to-do list, pick one that's based on your current level of energy. Just remember task. Top of your game, alert but not creative, sluggish or keeping awake. And because if you are at the top of your game and you're going through your spam folder, you're really squandering that high energy time when you could be doing great things. If you're in sluggish and keeping awake and you're trying to, say, write an important document, at the end of the day, it'll take you twice as long and it'll be of half the quality. So try to match your energy to the energy required for the project. Now, let's move to time management. Actually we're right on time. We're doing well, which actually is a good thing since we hit the time management piece. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a quick concept on it. There's a number in the book, but this is one of my favorite, and it's near time and far time. The concept is that people are much more protective of their schedule and resources in the near time than the far time. So near time is basically the next week or two. Far time, think of it as out a couple of months. So if I were to say to Brian, I would say, hey, Brian, I have a big meeting. It's 3 hours. It's the middle of next week. Can you join me? He might say, oh, God, middle of next week. I have this task due Friday. I have some meetings coming up. This system just blew up, and we're going to have to do a diagnostics as to what happened. You know, and so he'll be very protective to not give me that 3 hours next week. But what if I said, hey, Brian, in the first week of June, we're going to be having, or even I'll go out the end of June, we're going to be having a 3-hour meeting on blah, 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 whatever it is. He'll look at his schedule and he'll say, oh, I got nothing that week. Yeah, sure, I can do half a day. The problem is that far time eventually becomes what? Near time. You can use this, and so it'll be the 3 days before his 3-hour meeting with me, and Brian's going to sit back and go, oh my God, what was I thinking? Why did I agree to do this 3-hour thing with Eric? Because you know what, for the end of June or end of July, whenever it is that you don't know what your kid's soccer schedule is yet. You don't know what major project initiatives are going to come up. You don't know what projects are going to be behind, etc. You just see a mostly empty calendar. So use this to your advantage to protect your far time like it's near time, but also if Brian's really busy and I want to get on his schedule, what do I want to do? I want to schedule it as I want to get onto his schedule as soon as possible, because if it's still far time for him, then I'm more likely to get on it than if I say to you, hey Brian, what are you doing next Tuesday? Next, communication efficiency. Basically, I'll just leave it here. Isn't that like the cutest picture? I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, we actually used to do that, you know, play the telephone game. That will actually work if you've never done it. It's a fun kids activity, and it's a little science-oriented at the same time. But anyway, what happens is while overall productivity is organizational, communication is always personal. So what you want to do is you want to create a culture at your company that basically it's supported by the appropriate technologies. You know, that could be, you know, conference calling, video calling, you know, efficient email, you know, all those kind of things that will make it efficient, blogs, wikis for people to talk. Next is you want to maximize interpersonal interaction. Why? Because it's through these communications that people can coordinate things and so on. And third is what you want to do is you want to maximize minimize the level of effort and the length of time it takes to convey specific thoughts and messages. Why? Because it gives you more time to do other things. So now, some of you may have seen this. There's a lot of research behind this, but basically is that when humans gain meaning from other humans, it's based on these three things. 7% are from the words alone. So when you send an email to someone, all they can do is read your words. They don't know what your tone of voice is. They don't see your body language, but behind it, etc. So like here, what you're getting is, in this webinar, I'm not on video. So what you're getting is the 7% for the words and the 38% from the tone of my voice. I will actually, just as a trick I'll impart with you, is that I do the majority of this webinar standing up. The reason being is that I can basically give the essence and the feeling of body language by the level of movement and such that I'm doing. So that brings it up a little bit. But anyway, given that these are the three things, is that, and I'll give you an example of this. Let's say for Brian that I send him an email. Brian, great job on the last project. Can't wait to see what you do in the next one. Now, let me put a little tone in it. Is that I'm going to say it bad, and then I'm going to say it good. Hey, Brian, great job on the last project. Can't wait to see what you do next. Or I could say, Brian, great job on the project. Can't wait to see what you do next. Same words. One comes across condescending and sarcastic. The second one comes across like I really meant it. Now, if I just emailed Brian, then he would take it based on how I thought he did on how he thinks I thought he did on the project. So what does this implication mean of these percentages shown? Is that as you go through these types of interactions shown on the left, when does it make sense to email someone? You know, meetings in conference room 82. Fine, there's no meeting in that, it's logistics. But if you get the idea here, is for one-on-one, when do you want to use collaboration tools? When do you want to have video chat? Say maybe you're doing a performance review for a person who is remotely online. For one-on-one, when do you want to do webinars? When it is better to be on video? When are in-person presentations better, even if it means you flying to that city? And for many-to-many interactions, what are the right technologies for you to use? Are you using conference calls? Are you using basically conference call enhanced by video so that everybody can see either each other or the PowerPoint slides that are being shown, etc.? Or is it simply just online chat, like texting between people? What it will be based on is the combination of the discussion, the basis of the people that are on it. For example, two people who are, millennials, Gen Yers, they're much more comfortable just having texting back and forth and being able to gain meaning in it, because that's how they natively do a lot more of their communication than baby boomers. So think of it from what the topic is, what the discussion is. Is the discussion heated or basically just conversational? Is it you were trying to impart meaning? And then from this, pick the right tools based on strategically deciding based on the nature of the meeting, what mediums and philosophies you should use to cause that interaction. Again, we're going through, this is one topic in a 1-hour session, so that we can go through this in much greater detail. But the key here is, again, regarding it, is strategically think about what the best interaction type. Don't just always email or text somebody or always give them a call or always show up at their office. Think of the one that's most efficient based on your goal related to the communication. Next. Ongoing process improvement. What I'm going to give you here is I'm going to talk about a general 5-step process. This is ours. There are certainly many others. There's great work that's been done on Kaizen, if you're familiar with that, which is ongoing process improvement. There's the BPO steps. There's quality circles. There's a number of other things that are out there with it. That's good for you to know a little bit about. From here, what I'd like to do is just talk them through you generically at a high level. First, you have to decide which process to enhance. This is, in fact, what the next couple of slides will be. From there, don't underestimate the value of measurement and measuring what you want to improve. You see this one actually heavily as it relates to Six Sigma. And Lean actually also is that you have to do some measurement up front, not only so that you can see as your number 4 here, so you can remeasure it and see what the benefits were, but also what you can do is that you can assess to see, hey, is this maybe running more efficiently than we thought? So anyway, number 2 is define what the measurements are and that you're trying to get from what they are now and then what you would like to enhance. Step 3, do the enhancement. Whatever it is, build the software, change the process, whatever it might be. Number 4 is remeasure the factors that you measured in step 2, because what that does is that now helps you set up a process for ongoing measurement to develop trends and trend improvement or degradation, etc. Also what it does, moving to number 5, gives you the ability to report it. Because imagine Brian was my boss, and I went to him and said, hey, Brian, we increased the process, and oh, yeah, people think it runs really fast. Now, he's going to say, all right, that's great. How about if I said to him, hey, Brian, we just increased this process. We did some measurement on it before and after, and we found out that it's running 32% faster. It's saving us 18 cents per transaction on each of the 2,000 transactions we run per day, blah, blah, blah. That gives them a little more meat to sink into it and allows me to provide better reporting. It also, by the way, gives Brian good things to say in my performance review about the amount of actual time and money that was saved, or quality improvement, etc. If you're not familiar with Six Sigma, that's a great place to look. In fact, that was really the initial, I think, one of the initial areas of bringing the idea of true measurement into the IT world. The other one of those for IT is CMM, which was the capacity maturity model done by Carnegie Mellon. So CMM would be a good thing for you to look into in addition to those other things that I mentioned. Now, from this next couple of slides are just think about, well, how do you decide what to enhance? That in itself is a major process and requires deep thought. It might be based on productivity-based reasons. What you want to do is you want to reduce transaction cost, shorten the time of each transaction, reduce the number of human interactions per transaction. In other words, it just goes from Peter to Paul to Mary, instead of it also going to Mo, Larry, and Curly. So by reducing that, you're increasing people's personal productivity. Oh, excuse me. Next one is technology advancement. What you're doing is that you're fixing bugs or you're replacing old technologies with newer ones. Fixing old ones saves, increases quality. Replacing old technologies for new may mean it'll run faster, it'll be cheaper to process, etc. Remember, time, value, and money are things that you're looking for. Next, business-based reasons. You want to better align with the corporation. The company is changing its direction, and what you want to do is you want that hit that moving target. You know, if anyone's a hockey player, Wayne Gretzky was once asked, you know, how is it that you're always where the puck is? And what he answered was, and it's a famous quote of his, I don't go where the puck is now, I go to where I think the puck is going to be. So that's another reason why you may be in deciding which things to enhance productivity. And lastly, some things, the process changes you have to make are they're just legal or regulatory based, and you don't have a lot of choice. Doing them in an automated way is easier than doing it in a manual way. From here, isn't this picture cool? I was looking for the perfect picture related to asset reuse. And I hope you think I found it. What a great use of those. What are those called? Those binder things? How many of you, by the way, looking at this, are going to say, wow, I'm going to do that when I get back to my office. I saw this. Not only did I include it in the presentation, I've used this slide for a while now. But I've actually done that in my office, and it works out really well. But anyway, let's talk about asset reuse. What asset reuse is think about the things that you have in your company right now, the software you have, the tools, the equipment you've purchased. How can you use them for multiple purposes, which basically increases the productivity of those. It reduces the costs of having to buy something separate. Basically is reusing your existing assets, intellectual property, and processes and contacts in innovative ways, maximizes the value and dramatically increases their return on investment. How does it dramatically increase their ROI? Think about it, is that if you bought something for $100 and it provided $200 worth of benefit, that's really good. That's 100% return on investment. How about if by using it somewhere else, it's giving you another 100%. So now it's 300% return. You already bought it, so it didn't cost you any more money. So by adding on uses of things that you've already built or bought, it just increases the value that you're getting in front of them from the company. Let me make this one real to you. Here are some examples. Anyone using source code control? Do you know that that's a great way to do help desk versioning? It can be used as help desk versioning software. You know, when PCs come in, like for example, you buy a Dell PC. What are companies? What's the first thing they do? They empty the disk and they put in their own operating system build. You can use it for versioning. Microsoft Project, if you're only using it within IT and you have a site license, use it other places. You have old Linux servers around, you know, from doing server consolidation. Tie them together and use it as a big data analytics environment. If you use RFID readers internally, then go into the help desk where you store all the printer cartridges and put a little RFID card on each one of them, and then to do inventory, what you do is you just walk in there with the reader and poof, it's done. Now, if you write business requirements, if you're a business analyst, how about if you can write those requirements so that they can easily be converted into test cases and or training materials? Think of the amount of time that this will save the testers and the trainers. Next, If you've internally built a piece of quality software. In fact, I was doing a keynote yesterday. I'm in Boston. I did a keynote yesterday up in Toronto. And one of the things that I'd said to them regarding this slide specifically is I talked to someone in the group, and I said to them, hey, what are you working on? He said that he was building a new, very cool type of credit collection module. It was a standalone thing to help the company basically collect on accounts receivable. And I said to him, hey, when you're done with it, is it real? Oh, it's cool. There's nothing on the market like it. I said, why don't you offer it as a cloud-based product? And now IT can also become a revenue center. He wrote that one down, and I think that today he's talking to his boss about it. Or any type of data that you have internally. How can that data be reused in other ways to provide extra value? It may be for big data analytics, now that you have a few extra Linux servers hanging around from the earlier bullet point here. It could be anything. It could be GPS data that could be sold. It could be client data that you could use to better analyze things to figure out new features for products. It's endless. Now, what I want you to do, your homework assignment from today's webinar is this. I want you to sit back when you're in a contemplative moment, having coffee, just hanging out, going for a walk. If you're a runner or a cyclist, if you're a cyclist, pay attention to the traffic. You should if you're a runner too. But, as you're thinking about things, sort of in a contemplative moment, which things like shown on this slide can you use in your company? What IP, software, things along processes can you use to create new products and services internally or potentially new revenue streams for your company? Think about that. Write that one down. Do that one later. It could get you promoted. It could do a million things for both you and the company if you can come up with even one really good one. From here, what I'd like to do is I'd just like to remind you that this is going to be based on that what you saw is small excerpts from my new book, Productivity-Driven Success, and we'll be having a New Horizons class probably by the same name. I will also say regarding that, if this material is of value to you, and you think would be valuable to your firm, contact your New Horizons representative because we have a full-day class associated with this that can also be done as a private class inside of your company. From here, what I do is I just like to tell you some other things that are coming up. And again, for these, talk to your New Horizons representative. I mentioned that we do one of these monthly. The one that I'll be doing next month on June 7th is on conflict recognition and resolution. We have on June 13th a full-day class, webinar-based, online learning, called The Steve Jobs Way, Innovation and Leadership You Can Use, based on 2 books by a gentleman named Jay Elliott. We're the exclusive training provider for the materials related to that. And lastly, IT Lamp is a year-long program for IT leadership done virtually for, say, 10 or more people within your company. Management training isn't an event, it's a journey. Now, a 3-day event could be the beginning of that journey. Is every month we do an IT MLP certification boot camp. It's 10 topics in 3 days listed here. You can see them. Available on June 14th, 15th, and 16th of next month. From here, what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn it back to Brian for any questions that have come in.
Hey, Eric, yeah, there were some. So the first one is, when do you know when to use email versus meetings for a given topic?
Great question. One tip I would give you on that is if you find that you're going back and forth 3 or 4 times on the same email string, like I say, what do you think of that? And then I get back, well, I think this. Oh, what do you think of that? Is when your email becomes conversational. Then that's one reason that it's better to just pick up the phone and get it done. A second one is let's say that Brian's really mad at me, and he's spending, he says, oh, all right, I got to craft this perfect email. This is a different situation. Where he's saying, oh, I don't know how Eric's going to take it. I'm going to change the words here. If you find yourself crafting an email because you're not sure how I'm going to take it, you're spending like all day getting the wording right on it, just pick it up and talk to me on the phone for 5 minutes. So what I would say is understand the strategic reason for the communication. Quite frankly, the more personal, the more warm and fuzzy it is, the more likely you should do it in a phone call or an in person than an email. If it's something you want documented, let's say that Brian and I come to an agreement on something, and we had talked about it in a meeting, but I want to document it so that Brian can have plausible deniability that we didn't agree on it, then I'll send him an email back. So the trick at a base level is think strategically of what you want to do, and then think of the best medium to use to do it. Great question. Others, Brian?
So that same person came back and said, task was great, but what happens when something is high priority?
Well, certainly prioritization has to be considered. It's the nature of business. But what happens is that it's now prioritization. In what case does it say? Is that related to just tasks in general, or to what to delegate?
No, yeah, it just says what happens when something is high priority.
Well, if it's high priority, you have to do it first. I mean, that's the nature of high priority. But what I would say to you is that if if everything you have is high priority, then there's no priority. There's an old cartoon, excuse me, that says it has 3 categories of things: high priority, must do now, no delay possible. Which do you do first? So what I would say is prioritization, which is a whole topic within itself, might be a good idea for a webinar on prioritization, actually. But the thing is, once you know what to prioritize, is that what you want to do is that you want to then delegate that to certain people based on who can maybe get it done the fastest, the highest quality, etc. Great question on prioritization. It's probably it's based on a whole nother thing. So maybe, Brian, let's take a note to make that a whole webinar at a future time.
That we can do. And then there's one gentleman that has about 6 questions. We're out of time. I have to get on to another call, and I know Eric has other things. What I can do, Eric, is I can forward you this gentleman's questions, and maybe you can answer them for him, and we can get him the answers via email.
That would be great. Glad to do it. Unless, of course, it would make more sense from a productivity perspective for us to speak by phone. Send me the list and his email, and whoever that is that I'll either email you or I'll give you a quick phone call.
Sounds perfect. Well, thank you, everyone, for your time. We are about 1 minute over, so I'll wrap this up. Thank you, Eric, so much for taking the time out of your day to present this for us. As always, you did a fantastic job, and we're all, I'm sure, very grateful for the time that you took to present this. So everyone, have a great rest of your day.
You also. Thank you.